Some people say I haven't been talking about HIV recently, and so I'd like you to know that the brightness of the sun, actually dimness, has given me the opportunity to write to this, to do this video, shall we? Much better. Okay, oh, it's a lovely sun. Maybe I'll show you when it's still there. Wow, it's so... So, disproving facts, disproving myths with facts concerning HIV. Where do I start? See, usually the questions I get, especially on Grindr and some of these social apps, the ones I find ridiculous, is when people ask me, what are the symptoms of HIV? Why would you ask that? I mean, I get why you would want to know the symptoms of anything, just so you're mentally prepared. But if you're looking out for symptoms when you know you're dealing with HIV, I mean, we're talking about HIV. If you've been sexually active and you've explored your sexuality through intercourse that is unprotected, then obviously the first thing you should be thinking about is getting tested, not symptoms. Because I would like to tell you that not everybody shows signs of HIV. And there are 3 stages of it. The acute, the acute is the early stages are when some people get to experience symptoms, and then the acute stage is, which is also the acute stage, and then the latent stage is the where the virus remains dormant. And so at this stage, usually people between 5 to 10 years, you may not have any symptoms, even if you have the virus, and you can pass it on to anyone as long as you're not on treatment. And then there is the final stage, which is the AIDS, which is usually misconstrued as HIV. HIV and AIDS are 2 different things, and I'll get into that later. So there is the first or the early stage where people show no signs or symptoms. The latent stage, where... Oh my, did I miss that? There is the early stage, forgive me, there is the early stage where people show signs and symptoms. Some people, not everyone. And then there is the latent stage where the virus remains dormant, and then the final stage, just so we're clear. And if you want to get deeper about why some people show symptoms and some don't, you can just find it on Google. But if you genuinely want to know your symptoms before you get tested, when you know you've done the deed and you did it unprotected, fine. Here are some symptoms. Fatigue. And for most people, it's skin conditions. Some people begin to have flaky skin, or patches of eczema, and some people also begin to itch in various places, sometimes the face, sometimes the armpits or the groin area, the head. You begin to also have swellings in different places. It can be lymph nodes or even boils for some people. These are some of the most common symptoms. There is diarrhea as well. and flu-like symptoms. For some people, if they have underlying conditions, like if someone who has recurrent malaria might have repeated episodes of it. So it's different for everyone, and some don't even have symptoms. That is why it is always important to get tested. But I don't mean to scare you, because it is really not that scary. HIV is not scary. It's probably in modern days one of the easiest viruses to live with, because there is modern day treatments called the ARVs, antiretroviral, or ART, antiretroviral treatment, and I think it's like one of the modern day miracles in medicine, and it helps you to be able to live normal life expectancy like any average person who doesn't have HIV. And so you can live a healthy, fulfilling life as long as you're on treatment, and always seek early treatment. That's why I say, if you have doubts, if before you even come into my DMs, come into my Grindr, come into my Tinder to ask me about symptoms, if you have doubts, get tested. Even if you don't have doubts, do it as a regular thing. Every 3 months, get tested. Just get tested. That's it. Because the earlier you catch it, or the earlier you're diagnosed, the better. I mean, it makes your treatment so easy, because a lot of vitals would have been intact, especially your CD4 counts. That's the most important thing. Once your CD4 count is above a certain number, then we know that you are, you're good to save. Maybe that's a wrong term, but once your CD4 count is at a certain number, you are most likely capable of responding to treatment earlier. And if you've had symptoms prior to getting tested, all those things will vanish once you begin your ART treatment, and you will be normal again. So it's not that scary. Just get tested, get on treatment, and you're saved. You're normal like everybody. And the most iconic bit of it is that after a certain period of time of taking your treatment regularly, guess what? The HIV doesn't go away. I mean, it's subdued, like literally subdued, to the point that you cannot pass the virus on to anybody. Yeah, so it becomes untransmittable. And you know what they call that stage or that phase? We call it undetectable, because your virus cannot be detected. It means your viral load, or the number of animals number of viruses in your blood is so low, it's hard to even find on a test. And this usually will, for some people, it can be up to 6 months on treatment, and they are already undetectable. And for some, it takes longer, depending on how early you were able to catch your diagnosis or something. Yeah. So, I mean, how many facts have I given and how many myths have I? Well, just to round up, when you're on treatment and you've been on regularly, taking it judiciously for more than 6 months, you should be on your way, or even be undetectable. And this means you cannot transmit the virus to your sexual partners. But we also always advise that you use protection when you're having intercourse, because besides the fact that you get undetectable, you can still trap other infections or diseases. And this is something that is not common knowledge, but HIV is in two types. Just like the coronavirus and its variants, HIV is a virus too. It has its variants, and the type 1 is usually the most common, especially here in Africa. And the type 2 is also is not that common, but it's in the West African terrain. That's why it's predominant. And so while you're on your treatment and you're undetectable, it's safe to also know your sex partners, their type as well, or their status, whether they are positive and on treatment or they are negative, and also if they are positive, what type of HIV do they have? Is it type 1 or type 2? Because while you're undetectable, you can also get the other variant of the virus. So if you have type 1 and you are still having unprotected sex, it is possible to get type 2 from someone who is infected with type 2 who is not on treatment. So it's always advisable to be on condoms and other forms of protection. Condoms, number 1. And make sure your partners, your partner's statuses as well. So, have I covered everything I need to cover? Yeah, I think so. I'm glad you stayed with me, people who have been saying I have been speaking too much about HIV. Well, here you go. HIV myths and facts. Well, the sun is gone. You don't get to see it again. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Otiana Kendro, the healer of snake bites.